Imagine you own a car.
Right.
You bought it, you paid for every single part under the hood, and you have the title sitting right there in your glove box.
Right. It's yours.
Exactly, it's yours.
Yeah.
Now imagine a mechanic comes along, tells you the car needs this, major upgrade, and they quote unquote fix it using the exact parts you already bought and paid for. And then, and this is the kicker, they hand you a bill for a brand new car.
Which is just, that's infuriating. And if you refuse to pay that bill, the mechanic essentially tells you that you are legally barred from ever driving your own vehicle again.
Right.
It is the ultimate double charge, just, held in place by complete bureaucratic hostage taking.
Yeah, and so I want you, the listener, to take that exact scenario, but scale it up to the absolute limits of the United States military-industrial complex.
Oh, yeah. Way beyond a car.
Right. We aren't talking about a Honda Civic here. We are talking about multi-billion-dollar enterprise contracts, next-generation stealth fighter jets, global logistics networks, and literally the foundational architecture of the internet itself.
It's massive.
It is. So welcome to this deep dive. Today, we have just a massive stack of source material sitting in front of us. It is a highly detailed, legally dense, and honestly, technologically radical document. It's titled The Atomic Express.
And our mission for you today is to unpack this high-stakes collision. We're looking at a battle between a lone inventor and, essentially, the entire U.S. defense establishment.
And big tech.
Right, alongside Silicon Valley's biggest tech giants.
Yeah.
The dynamic here is just fascinating. It has the hallmarks of a David and Goliath story, but David in this case is, incredibly well-armed.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing.
Exactly. He has this granular understanding of administrative law and high-level engineering. The author of this document is R.J. Aguiar, and I think it is critical to establish his background right out of the gate so you understand the lens through which we are analyzing these claims.
Because this isn't just some guy, right?
No, absolutely not. This isn't someone typing conspiracy theories in a basement and mailing them to the Pentagon. Aguiar is a former managing director at Goldman Sachs and a former Google search rankings staff engineer.
Okay, wow. So his entire career has been built on understanding massive global-scale data architectures and following the flow of institutional money.
Right. He knows how to build complex systems, and he definitely knows how they get funded.
That's a serious resume.
It is. And that background informs everything we are about to discuss today. He brings a very clinical, data-driven, almost, like a debugging perspective to systemic inefficiencies within the government.
Like finding a glitch in the matrix.
Yeah, exactly. And what he is alleging in this document is not a conspiracy theory. It is a fully documented administrative and legal battle playing out right now via Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation supplement claims.
Which the industry usually just calls DFARers, right?
Right, DFARers.
Okay, so here's the hook for you listening right now. You are paying for this. If you pay taxes, your money is tied up in this dispute.
Literally your tax dollars.
Yep. It is time you saw the receipts, because if these DFARS claims hold water, this is a story about your tax dollars vanishing into an administrative loophole of just epic proportions.
And over the next hour or so, we are going to look at everything from nuclear-powered logistics trains that balance their own weight to post-binary optical computing that uses light instead of electricity.
Which is wild.
It is. And even secretive hardware upgrades for the F-35 fighter jet. But before we get to the wild technology, we really need to understand the legal trap that makes this entire document so explosive.
Yeah, because without a firm grasp of the legal framework, the engineering claims we're going to discuss will just sound like science fiction.
Exactly. The foundation of this entire situation rests on a portfolio of 52 patents filed by Aguiar.
52.
52. And these are detailed extensively in a book he published called The Architecture of Control. Now, here is the critical maneuver that sets the trap. Aguiar executed a perpetual, irrevocable, worldwide, royalty-free, non-exclusive license. And this license grants the U.S. federal government and its military full rights to use these 52 inventions.
Wait, let me stop you there to make sure I am grasping the magnitude of this. He took 52 highly advanced technological patents and just gave them away.
He did.
For free.
To the military.
For any and all national defense and intelligence operations, yes. Free of charge. He explicitly excluded state and local governments from this free pass, but the federal defense apparatus. They have complete unencumbered rights to build and deploy these systems without paying him a single cent in royalties.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if I invent a revolutionary piece of technology and I just hand the blueprints to the Pentagon and say, here, use this, no charge, how does a massive defense contractor end up billing the government for it?
Right. You'd think it's free.
Yeah, because if the government already owns the right to use it, shouldn't the government just hire the contractor for the labor and the raw materials? Well, to understand how the double charge actually happens, we have to look at a piece of federal law. It's known as 28 U.S.C. Section 1498. Under normal circumstances, the government has eminent domain over domestic intellectual property.
Eminent domain, like when they seize land for a highway?
Exactly like that, but for ideas. This means if the military urgently needs a specific technology for national security, say, a new type of radar, they could just take the patent and use it.
Wow.
Yeah. And to keep the military supply chain running smoothly, the law shields their vendors, the defense contractors, from civil injunctions.
Meaning the original inventor can't just file a lawsuit to legally halt the production of the radar? They can't stop Lockheed Martin from building the weapon system?
Correct. The production of the defense asset cannot be stopped by a patent dispute. Instead, the government assumes the financial liability. The inventor is forced to sue the United States government in the Court of Federal Claims to get their royalty checks.
Oh, I see.
And meanwhile, the contractor is indemnified and gets to keep building and billing.
So normally the government says to the defense contractor, go ahead and build this patented tech. If the inventor gets mad, don't worry, we will pay the massive settlement out of the taxpayer's pocket.
That is the standard operating procedure.
Yeah.
But Aguiar flipped the script entirely.
Yeah.
Because he already granted the technology to the government for free, the United States owes zero royalties.
Oh.
Yeah. There is no settlement to pay in the Court of Federal Claims. The government holds clear free title to use the tech. But Aguiar is alleging that companies like Apple, Google, Meta, Microsoft, and massive defense integrators like Science Applications International Corporation, SEI, are taking his underlying intellectual property, building it into their proprietary hardware and software.
And then baking the research, development, and licensing costs of that IP into the massive bills they send to the Pentagon. So to go back to my car mechanic analogy, the contractor isn't just charging the military for the physical metal, the silicon chips and the labor required to screw the parts together. They are actively charging the government a premium for the underlying intellectual property, the idea itself, which the government already legally has the right to use for free.
That is the core allegation driving these DFARS claims. And Aguiar isn't just quietly posting this theory on a blog somewhere. He is executing formal, aggressive administrative action.
Right, he's going after them.
Big time. He is utilizing a digital service called RPost. Now, RPost sends cryptographically verified timestamped emails that provide forensic proof of delivery and opening.
Like a digital certified letter.
Exactly. And he is sending these digital legal notices directly to the top of the food chain. We're talking about the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, the Chief Technology Officer, Emil Michael, and the CEOs of Big Tech, Tim Cook at Apple, Mark Zuckerberg at Meta, Sundar Pichai at Google.
Okay, I have to push back on this a little bit. Sending an email to Mark Zuckerberg accusing his company of procurement fraud regarding military contracts is it's a bold move.
It's extremely bold.
But realistically, Mark Zuckerberg gets millions of emails. What legal weight does an RPost cryptographically verified email actually hold in a federal court if Meta's legal team just routes it to a spam folder or has an assistant delete it?
That is the brilliance of the RPost mechanism and the specific statute Aguiar is leveraging, which is 35 U.S.C. Section 154, Day 3. This statute deals with a legal concept called actual knowledge.
Actual knowledge.
And
Okay.
standard email, yeah, you can claim it went to spam, but an RPost registered email tracks the SMTP server handshakes. It generates a cryptographic hash of the content and registers the exact millisecond the recipient server accepts the data. It creates an undeniable chain of custody.
So they can't claim they didn't receive it.
They absolutely cannot. By serving these verified notices directly to the procuring contracting officers of the Pentagon and the corporate executives in Silicon Valley, Aguiar is systematically stripping away their plausible deniability.
Uh-huh.
If a military contracting officer receives a cryptographically verified email detailing exactly how a contractor is double charging them for free IP, and that officer continues to approve the financial disbursements without initiating an audit,
The legal landscape shifts.
radically.
Ah.
It crosses a very dangerous line from bureaucratic oversight into complicity in procurement fraud. It creates an immutable digital footprint of inaction.
Man, it's a bureaucratic checkmate. He is putting them on notice so that ignorance is no longer a legal defense. Now, before we dive into the specific mind-bending technologies these companies are allegedly infringing on, we do need to make a quick note to you, the listener.
Yes, very important context here.
As we explore this source material, you will notice mentions of politically sensitive figures and geopolitical adversaries. The document features photos of Donald Trump at his 2025 inauguration alongside these tech CEOs. It references elite operatives of the Chinese Communist Party and Venezuelan political figures like Nelson Lara of the PSUV.
The source text weaves a very complex geopolitical web involving foreign state actors, intelligence agencies, and domestic politicians across the spectrum.
And we want to be absolutely clear, we are impartially reporting the contents of this document. We are not taking any political sides, left or right. We are not endorsing the viewpoints of the content. Our sole mission today is to convey the ideas, the administrative legal claims, and the incredible engineering concepts contained in this original source material so you can understand the scope of the dispute.
Right, and those engineering concepts are staggering. To understand how you actually use this free intellectual property and why the military would want this technology in the first place, we really have to look at the first massive piece of hardware at the center of this legal trap.
Okay, let's get into it.
The Atomic Express.
The Atomic Express. I mean, even the name sounds like a retro-futuristic comic book. This is USPTO patent application number 699,028. And the concept here is a distributed nuclear-powered logistics system for ultra-long-haul transport, basically a train that never has to stop.
Exactly. But to appreciate the solution, we have to deeply understand the physical limitations of traditional heavy logistics.
Okay.
Whether we are discussing a mile-long freight train or a massive convoy of military supply trucks, they are limited by two fundamental physics problems: fuel density and mechanical tension.
Right.
Let's look at a traditional train. You have a massive locomotive at the front pulling dead weight. The cumulative draft force, the tension on those front mechanical couplers is immense. Every single rail car added to the back increases the strain on the front hitches.
Because it's dragging all that weight.
Right. If the train gets too heavy, or if it tries to go up a steep incline, the physical metal hitches will simply snap under the tension.
So Aquara's solution completely re-engineers how weight and propulsion are distributed. It starts with what the patent calls the lead vehicle. But this isn't just a bigger diesel engine. It is a rolling power plant.
A literal power plant.
Yeah. The source describes it containing a compact nuclear reactor, specifically noting a generation the V molten salt reactor or a small modular reactor. This reactor is coupled to an electrical turbine, generating just megawatts of electricity.
But here's the crucial distinction, that lead vehicle does not pull the train in the traditional mechanical sense. Behind the lead vehicle is a chain of auxiliary units, which the patent calls nodes.
Nodes?
Yeah. These nodes are self-propelled electric vehicles. They don't have their own massive batteries, and they definitely don't have diesel combustion engines. Instead, the entire convoy is connected by two continuous umbilical spines running down the center of the train.
Like a nervous system.
Yeah, exactly. A high-voltage power bus distributing the electricity from the nuclear reactor, and a high-speed fiber optic data bus.
Okay, let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. Think of a traditional train, like a dog pulling a heavy sled on a leash. All the tension, all the strain is on that single leash. If the sled gets too heavy, the leash breaks, or the dog just can't move.
Perfect analogy.
Right, so the Atomic Express is entirely different. It's more like a centipede. Every single leg, or in this case, every single node, is receiving power from the brain, and it is carrying its own weight perfectly. The brain isn't dragging the body is moving itself in unison.
That is a highly accurate visualization. And the mechanism that allows that centipede to move without tripping over its own legs is a concept called zero-tension mesh control. In between every single node, embedded inside the mechanical hitches that connect the vehicles, there are piezoelectric strain gauge sensors.
Wait, piezoelectric, I've seen that word on the specifications for my acoustic guitar pickups, and I think it's in those, those clicky gaslators.
Yeah.
How does a guitar pickup technology translate to a million-pound train hitch?
It sounds crazy, but the underlying physics are exactly the same, and it is a beautiful application of material science. The piezoelectric effect occurs when you put physical pressure on certain crystalline materials.
Oh, okay.
When the crystal lattice is compressed or stretched, it forces electrons out of place, generating an electrical charge that is directly proportional to the amount of pressure applied.
So in a guitar, the vibration of the string squeezes the crystal, creating an electrical signal that goes to the amplifier.
Yes. And in a train, hitch bearing thousands of tons of steel, those crystals are being squeezed by compression or pulled by tension. The harder they are squeezed or pulled, the higher the voltage they spit out.
Oh, wow.
Right. Those voltage readings are fed instantly into the fiber optic data bus. The system's distributed computing mesh reads those electrical pulses in real time. It treats the entire miles-long convoy as a single collaborative organism.
So let's say node number 40 in the chain starts dragging a bit. Maybe it hit a patch of ice or its wheel bearings are stiff. The piezoelectric sensor in the hitch feels that tension instantly.
Exactly. The local electric motor on node 40 instantly reads that data and increases its torque to catch up, neutralizing the strain on the hitch before the metal even has a chance to stress. It actively maintains quote-unquote zero tension across every single coupler.
That's incredible.
It really is. It turns a rigid, dumb chain of steel into a flexible, highly responsive organism.
That is wild. By actively managing the torque of every wheel, it effectively removes the physical limits on how long a convoy can be. Because the hitches aren't bearing the cumulative weight of thousands of tons, they are only bearing the negligible force needed to keep the electrical and data connections intact.
Yep. Infinite scaling, basically.
But I have to ask you the obvious question here. A smart train is great, but is it safe to put a nuclear reactor on wheels and drive it down a highway or a rail network? I mean, passive cooling is great for a system failure, but what happens if an 18-wheeler T-bones a mobile nuclear reactor at 70 miles an hour? Does Aguar's patent address the physical, ballistic reality of moving nuclear material?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question, and it is precisely why the document targets specific military agencies. The text explicitly cites the Naval Reactor Command's NAVSEA-08 and the National Nuclear Security Administration.
Oh, because they already do this.
Exactly. The U.S. military already manages mobile nuclear reactors inside submarines and aircraft carriers, which operate in highly kinetic combat environments. Furthermore, a generation of the V molten salt reactor operates at atmospheric pressure.
Which means what, exactly?
Well, unlike a traditional pressurized water reactor, which wants to flash boil and explode outward into a radioactive steam cloud if the containment vessel is breached, a molten salt reactor has its radioactive fuel dissolved within the liquid salt itself.
So if there is a catastrophic accident,
If the containment is breached in a highway accident, the liquid salt pours out, hits the ambient air, and immediately freezes into a solid rock.
it just freezes solid, like glass.
Right, exactly like glass.
Yeah.
It traps the radioactive isotopes inside a stable matrix rather than venting them into the atmosphere. The engineering leap isn't making the reactor safe. It's scaling down that naval technology, putting it on reinforced pavement or rails, and using it to power a distributed mesh network.
And that mesh network allows for a physics phenomenon called kinetic energy arbitrage. This blew my mind when I read it. Let's take this miles-long centipede train and run it over a massive mountain range like the Rockies.
Okay, yeah. In a traditional linear system, the physics are entirely fighting against you. The units cresting the peak and going downhill have to ride their mechanical friction brakes so they don't accelerate out of control and crash into the front locomotive.
Right, they just pile up.
Yeah. They're taking all that massive gravitational momentum and wasting it as heat. Meanwhile, the units still on the uphill slope are burning massive amounts of diesel fuel fighting gravity.
But the Atomic Express uses that physics to its advantage. The units on the downhill slope use their gravitational momentum to mechanically push the convoy forward, and simultaneously they utilize regenerative braking.
Right.
The electric motors inside the wheels switch modes and act as generators, turning that downward momentum into raw electricity. And then they feed that electricity back into the shared high-voltage power bus, which shoots it instantly to the units currently struggling up the hill.
The mass of the convoy literally becomes its own battery. It is a closed-loop energetic ecosystem. And to keep this massive, shifting organism stable, especially on a decline, it uses a progressive rear-first braking sequence.
Because if a traditional train slams the brakes at the front, all the cars behind it smash into it, causing a catastrophic jackknife.
Exactly. The physics of momentum dictate that you cannot stop a heavy column from the front. The Atomic Express solves this by applying the brakes starting at the very last node in the chain and propagating the signal forward. This creates a stabilizing drag anchor effect.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it pulls the entire chain perfectly taut, keeping it aligned while shedding speed.
I want you, the listener, to just imagine the supply chain crises we have experienced over the last few years. You know, the ports backed up, the truck driver shortages. Now imagine those bottlenecks being instantly solved by zero-emission trains of infinite length that never, ever need to stop for diesel fuel. It entirely rewrites the mathematics of global logistics.
It does. But a train is inherently linear. Supply chains are webs. To truly revolutionize global logistics, you have to break away from the rails. And that is why Aguirre's vision doesn't stop with a single land-based convoy.
Right, it gets bigger.
Much bigger. The Atomic Express architecture is actually just the foundation for a much broader multimodal system called the Marcelo Loop.
The Marcelo Loop, that stands for Modular Autonomous Rapid Collaborative Energy Logistics Orchestration. And this is where we zoom out from a single train to a global supply chain replacement.
In the Marcelo Loop, the auxiliary units are called leaf nodes. These aren't just dumb cargo boxes permanently attached to a train. They are autonomous, self-propelled flatbed platforms with their own steering and navigation systems.
Like giant drones on wheels.
Basically, yeah. They can independently drive off the main convoy, navigate through city streets to a loading dock, load up vehicles or heavy cargo, and then drive back to a designated rendezvous point and automatically couple into a massive passing nuclear convoy.
And this modularity solves one of the biggest geopolitical vulnerabilities the U.S. faces today, the lithium battery monopoly.
Huge problem.
It is. Because if you want to electrify a massive fleet of long-haul trucks right now using current technology, you need gargantuan 1,000 kilowatt-hour battery packs for every single truck.
Yeah.
That requires a staggering amount of raw lithium, cobalt, and rare earth metals.
And we don't control those resources.
No. The mining and refining of those minerals are currently dominated by foreign cartels and adversarial nations. We are essentially trading dependence on foreign oil for dependence on foreign lithium.
But the Marcelo Loop elegantly sidesteps that entire geopolitical trap. Because the primary long-haul power is provided by the rolling nuclear core through the shared high-voltage bus, the individual leaf nodes do not need massive, heavy batteries.
Because they're plugged in most of the time.
Exactly. They only need a small, single-use, 50-mile fail-safe battery buffer. Just enough electrical juice to decouple from the main power bus, drive the last few miles to a warehouse, and return to the convoy.
The document states this reduces the required lithium footprint for a national logistics network by 90%. You can build 10 of these synchronized mobile nodes using the exact same mineral footprint as one traditional electric semi-truck. It is not just an environmental play, it is a blueprint for closed-loop energetic independence.
And that independence translates across multiple domains. The patents cover expansions into maritime, aerial, and even space logistics.
Space?
Yeah, but let's take the atomic ferry concept for maritime shipping first. Currently, the global supply chain relies on massive cargo ships burning highly polluting bunker fuel. Aguirre proposes using one single advanced naval reactor. The document specifically cites a 700-megawatt thermal A1B carrier reactor core, the kind currently used in Ford-class aircraft carriers. But instead of putting it in a warship, you optimize it strictly as a floating electrical turbine.
And how do you connect ships at sea?
You tether 7 ultra-large 24,000 TEU container ships together. To give you context, a TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit. It's the standard shipping container you see on trucks.
Okay, so 24,000 of those.
Yeah. A 24,000 TEU ship is roughly a quarter-mile long. It is a floating skyscraper. The reactor ship acts as the lead node, tethered via a hardened maritime power bus to the trailing ships. The reactor drives the massive electrical propulsion systems of the trailing ships, moving a flotilla stretching to the horizon across the ocean at 14 to 16 knots using zero fossil fuels.
And the aerial version allows for in-flight coupling and electrical recharging, so mid-air refueling, but for electrons instead of highly flammable jet fuel. And it even scales to space, allowing for the collaborative movement of heavy orbital objects, using the same distributed computing mesh to perfectly balance the thrust of multiple independent space tugs.
But because this is a defense document being sent to the Pentagon, the most critical applications of the Marcelo Loop are military. When you have megawatt-scale power routing down a shared bus through a military convoy in a combat zone, you have an abundance of energy that can be weaponized defensively.
The document calls this the Infinite Magazine Air Defense Shield. A traditional logistics convoy carrying fuel or ammunition is highly vulnerable to drone swarms or missile strikes. They have limited anti-aircraft missiles. But if your convoy is generating nuclear-level electricity, you can power rolling arrays of directed energy weapons, high-powered lasers, and microwave counter-drone modules.
You project an impenetrable, localized air defense dome that never runs out of ammunition because its ammunition is electricity. As long as the reactor is spinning, the lasers can fire.
And if a kinetic strike does somehow penetrate that shield, the system has a survivability protocol called Ghost Convoy.
This is fascinating.
I read this part and my jaw dropped. So if an adversary bombs the highway in front of the convoy, creating a massive crater, a traditional convoy is trapped. They can't go forward, And they can't turn a mile-long train of trucks around on a two-lane road. They are sitting ducks for a secondary strike, but with the Marcelo loop.
The distributed mesh network detects the explosive anomaly and instantly executes a mid-transit software decoupling. The physical hitches instantly disengage.
Just drop the connection.
Yep. The individual leaf nodes rely on their 15-mile fail-safe batteries to independently drive off-road. They scatter defensively around the blast zone, navigating autonomously past the crater using onboard sensors, and then automatically recouple seamlessly back into a synchronized chain on the other side of the impact zone.
So if a road is bombed, the convoy just shatters like glass, drives around the crater on battery power like a swarm of insects, and magnetically snaps back together on the other side.
That's the design.
That is science fiction, but the more I think about it, a system like that cannot run on traditional computers. To coordinate the physics of a miles-long convoy, making split-second torque adjustments based on piezoelectric feedback across thousands of nodes while dodging craters. The data load must be astronomical.
That is the perfect transition because it leads us directly into the next major section of Aguirre's DFARS claims. The physical hardware, the hitches, the motors, the molten salt is impressive. But to run a convoy that acts like a single organism, you need unimaginable computing power. Traditional computers simply cannot process that volume of sensory data fast enough without choking on their own architecture.
And that brings us to the second massive target of this deep dive, the silicon obsolescence. Aguirre isn't just going after defense contractors building trucks and trains. He is taking aim directly at the titans of big tech: Apple, Google, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Intel.
All of them.
Because you can't run a web of autonomous nuclear vehicles with normal computers. The data load breaks traditional silicon.
To understand these specific patent claims, we have to look at how modern computers currently process information. Almost all modern computing, what we call legacy silicon, relies on synchronous binary processing. Information is represented by zeros and ones, which are physically transmitted as electrical pulses moving across microscopic copper wire layouts inside the silicon chip.
Which has limits.
Severe limits. Physical copper has immutable bandwidth limits, and pushing billions of electrons through copper generates immense electrical resistance, which manifests as heat. We are physically hitting the thermodynamic wall of what traditional silicon chips can do.
Right, if you push them too hard, they melt. And Aguirre's patents detail a massive paradigm shift. He is claiming that legacy silicon is structurally obsolete for next-generation defense needs. His portfolio outlines a shift to asynchronous, optical, post-binary parametric models.
Let's translate that into plain English.
Please do.
Instead of using electrical pulses moving through copper to represent ones and zeros, this architecture uses light photons moving through free space or fiber optics to move data. And it is not binary. Binary is base 2. It is either on or off. High radix numbering, which his patents cover, means using a mathematical base much higher than 2. Instead of just checking if a pulse of light is present or absent, the computer checks the specific color of the light, the polarization angle, and the intensity.
Wait, so suddenly, one single pulse of light isn't carrying one tiny bit of data, it is carrying a massive multi-dimensional package of information.
Exactly. By using multi-wavelength light frames, this architecture bypasses the traditional heat bottlenecks entirely. Photons don't generate the resistance that electrons do. It creates data pipelines of unimaginable width and processing speed.
Okay, so he invented a theoretical way to build supercomputers using light instead of electricity. That's a great academic achievement. But why is he sending cryptographically verified threat letters to Mark Zuckerberg and Tim Cook?
Because he alleges that it is no longer theoretical. He claims that these commercial giants are already quietly utilizing his patented optical architectures to solve their own hardware bottlenecks in consumer devices, and then selling those devices to the military via the Department of Defense Enterprise Software Initiative.
Let's get specific. He calls out Apple, Google, and Microsoft regarding their mobile operating systems, iOS, Android, Windows. He claims they are infringing on a patent titled Method and System for De-anonymizing Radio Frequency Signals via a Distributed Sensor Array. What does that actually mean for the phone in my pocket?
Okay, so if you are a soldier in a contested battlefield environment, the most dangerous thing your phone or radio can do is emit a radio frequency, or an RF signal. Adversaries deploy covert, localized signal monitoring frameworks that scan the spectrum. If your device broadcasts an RF signal, they can triangulate the coordinates of your device and drop an artillery shell on your location.
Obviously bad.
Very bad. Aguirre's patent covers a decentralized architecture that uses nanosecond time of arrival differentials to identify, isolate, and neutralize these hidden tracking grids.
Wait, let me make sure I understand the mechanism there. Time of arrival differentials.
If an adversary sets up a hidden cell tower to track phones, it has to emit its own signal. Aguar's system uses a distributed array of friendly sensors to listen for that enemy signal. By measuring the microscopic nanosecond difference in when that enemy signal hits sensor A versus sensor B, the system can calculate exactly where the enemy tracker is located and neutralize it.
And he's saying that the location services infrastructure inside commercial smartphones sold to the military actively utilizes this sovereign defense framework to protect the user's location without compensating him for the patent.
That is the allegation. And the claims get even more specific when we look at Meta and Apple. He targets Oculus virtual reality headsets and Apple's AirDrop technology.
This one is fascinating. The patent he cites is for high bandwidth, free space optical data exchange.
Think about the data requirements of a VR headset. You need to stream massive amounts of high-definition visual data from a computer to the headset with zero latency. If there is even a microsecond of lag, the user experiences severe motion sickness.
Right.
If you use traditional Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, which are radio frequencies, that data can be intercepted by an adversary scanning the area.
Right. Think of radio waves like shouting across a crowded room. Anyone with a microphone can hear you. You are broadcasting in all directions.
But Aguar's patent uses multi-wavelength light frames, he calls them logical superpixels, to transmit data optically through free space.
So, to fix the metaphor, using free space optical data is like slicing open a fiber optic cable, taking the two ends, and pointing them directly at each other across the room. The data is riding on a tight, invisible beam of light. If you aren't standing perfectly intersecting that beam, you see nothing. It is entirely invisible to radio scanners.
That is a perfect analogy. The data is encoded in the frequency of the light waves. It allows tactical mobile units to share massive intelligence files or stream immersive VR battlefield environments without emitting a single interceptable radio wave. And Aguar alleges that the advanced wireless streaming protocols in Meta's headsets and the proximity-based file transfer fabrics in Apple's devices like AirDrop directly mirror this spatial light architecture.
So he's saying the tech inside my phone's AirDrop is actually a pre-licensed sovereign defense framework, and Apple shouldn't be allowed to charge the military a premium for the underlying IP.
That is the claim. And he extends this argument to the data center side as well. He specifically names NVIDIA and Intel Federal LLC. The military is heavily investing in artificial intelligence, which requires massive centralized heavy compute initiatives.
Yeah, AI is everywhere now.
And Aguar alleges that the architectures NVIDIA and Intel are building for the military, specifically citing the H100 or the B200 NVL74 Blackwell systems, are beginning to infringe on his patents for high-radix array optimization and massively parallel optical interconnects.
Because to build AI models that powerful, you have to move away from copper wire and start using light to connect the thousands of processors. Otherwise, the entire server rack just melts from the resistance.
Which brings us to the defense titans. Because while big tech handles the consumer devices and the massive data centers in climate-controlled warehouses, the actual weapons platforms, the stealth jets, the drones, the intelligence networks, those are built by the heavy hitters of the military-industrial complex.
Right.
And who needs these new physics more than the military engineers trying to build weapons that run too hot?
Let's start with the crown jewel of the U.S. military, Lockheed Martin and the F-35 fighter jet. So if Apple and Google are hitting physical heat limits in their air-conditioned data centers, what happens when you try to cram that exact same processing power into the nose cone of a fighter jet flying at Mach 1.6? You can't just install a giant cooling fan.
The thermal and weight constraints of an airborne stealth fighter are incredibly strict. The document specifically cites the F-35 Technology Refresh 3, or TR-3. This is a massive upgrade to the jet's computational core, promising a 25x increase in computing power to handle new sensors and electronic warfare suites.
I know from building my own gaming PC that more power means more heat. How do you cool a computer inside a sealed stealth jet without compromising its aerodynamics?
According to Aguar, you can't. Not with traditional silicon. He claims that to achieve this TR-3 upgrade, without melting the airframe from the inside out, Lockheed Martin had to abandon traditional electrical data buses and utilize his optical computing architecture.
Wow.
By replacing the electrical input-output bottlenecks with his massively parallel optical interconnects, they can reduce the clock speeds of the processors, drastically lower the heat output, and still maintain massive data throughput because the data is moving via light.
And he also goes after Lockheed's partnerships regarding quantum computing, correct?
Yes. Lockheed has strategic collaborations focusing on quantum machine learning, or QML. Agware asserts that to build these hybrid quantum classical workflows, Lockheed must use his patented physically disaggregated computing systems. In this architecture, classical GPUs and sensitive quantum processors are physically separated to prevent thermal interference, but they are linked via his ultra-high bandwidth optical fabric to function as a single unit.
Okay, so that's Lockheed Martin dealing with hardware limitations. What about Palantir? Palantir is famous for software and data integration, not building jets.
Palantir runs Project Titan and Project Maven for the military. Their software, platforms like Gotham and Foundry, takes massive chaotic data sets, satellite imagery, intercepted communications, troop movements, and builds network dependency graphs to find the needle in the haystack.
And Agware claims they're using his specific mathematical methodologies. How do you actually calculate a blast radius in a social network?
His patents cover power holder analysis in social networks. In mathematical graph theory, you have nodes, people or entities, and edges, which are the connections between them. Agware's algorithm doesn't just look for who has the most connections. It identifies indispensable bottlenecks.
Okay, like a linchpin.
Exactly. If you remove a specific node, does the entire network collapse? That is a power holder. He also claims Palantir's internal security uses his method for calculating a precise, quote-unquote, blast radius vulnerability score.
Let's build on that. A blast radius for an information leak.
Yes. The algorithm maps out exactly which users have access to what data. If a specific analyst's account is compromised, the dependency graph calculates the exact blast radius of what connected systems and intelligence files are now vulnerable, allowing the system to instantly quarantine that section of the network. He alleges Palantir built their defense frameworks on his patented algorithms.
And then there is Endural Industries, known for their autonomous systems and Lattice OS.
Agware accuses them of using his patents for coordinated dual vehicle scanning. This is a mechanism where multiple autonomous drones securely link their sensors to fuse multispectral data. Instead of one drone sending radar data to a base and another sending optical data, they process it collaboratively in the air to identify a target. He also cites their use of autonomous robotic data logistics, which involves using robotic units to physically retrieve and transport high-capacity data payloads in environments where radio transmission is jammed by the enemy or too dangerous to use.
It is a relentless targeting of every single major modernization effort the Pentagon is currently undertaking. But the most terrifying part of this section isn't the monetary fraud. It isn't the double charging. It's what the document calls the asymmetric decryption threat.
This is where the document transitions from a complex procurement dispute into a severe national security warning. The U.S. military, and the global financial system for that matter, relies on legacy cryptography systems like RSA or elliptic curve cryptography. These frameworks operate on a key-first paradigm. They require a complete cryptographic handshake to synchronize before any secure data can move.
And those encryption standards rely on the assumption that traditional binary computers simply aren't fast enough to guess the complex math problem. Like they don't have the processing power to brute force the key before the heat melts the computer or the universe ends.
Exactly. The security is based on the physical limits of traditional silicon. But Agware's optical, high-radix post-binary computers process data in a fundamentally different way. A computer built natively on his optical inventions possesses the mathematical cardinality and parallel throughput to execute brute force decryption vectors that would absolutely shred legacy silicon-based encryption.
Let me make sure I grasp the geopolitical weight of what you're saying. If a foreign state actor, a peer adversary like China or Russia, takes Agware's blueprints, which are publicly available as patent applications right now, and builds a high-radix optical compute network before the Department of Defense transitions away from legacy silicon,
then the adversary could read U.S. classified networks like an open book. The encryption protecting our multi-billion-dollar defense arrays, our power grids, and our financial institutions would be instantly obsolete.
That is a staggering geopolitical threat vector. The U.S. military has a perpetual, zero-cost, legally binding right to construct this next-generation computing tier right now. But if they ignore the license because of bureaucratic inertia or because they don't want to upset the massive defense contractors and a rival superpower builds it first, it is a catastrophic loss of technological dominance.
And Agware is not playing nice about making sure the defense contractors understand this liability. He explicitly reminds Lockheed Martin's lawyers of their SEC disclosure requirements.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he tells them in these RPost emails, if you are infringing on this IP, You have a fiduciary duty to file a material risk disclosure with the Securities and Exchange Commission. And if your internal legal counsel knows about it, they have an ethical obligation under Model Rule 8.3 of the American Bar Association to report the fraud.
Is this just an incredibly aggressive legal bluff or a masterclass in cornering a multi-billion-dollar corporation in administrative red tape?
It is extreme legal pragmatism. By citing SEC rules and attorney ethics, he is bypassing the corporate shields. He is applying pressure directly to the individual licenses, livelihoods, and careers of the lawyers involved. He is making it personally, professionally risky for them to ignore his emails or route them to a spam folder.
But you can't accuse the most powerful companies on Earth of procurement fraud, threaten their multi-billion-dollar military contracts, and try to disbar their lawyers without making some very powerful enemies.
Oh, definitely not.
When you corner defense contractors with their own thermal limitations and legal liabilities, they don't just surrender, they retaliate asymmetrically. Which brings us to the final and honestly most bizarre section of this deep dive, the blowback.
When you poke the bear swings back. But Aguiar claims the retaliation didn't come in a federal courtroom in Washington, D.C., or a patent tribunal in Silicon Valley. It happened in a local county court in Texas.
This is where the story turns into a Jason Bourne movie, but with a weird bureaucratic twist. Aguiar alleges a synchronized pattern of extrajudicial duress that occurred immediately, like the next business day following his DFAR submissions to the Pentagon. He specifically names the 387th District Court of Fort Bend County, Texas.
He claims that highly irregular civil maneuvers occurred in a domestic relations track. He alleges manual ad hoc alterations of digital docket timestamps via the Tyler Technologies Odyssey infrastructure.
Let's expand on that. What is Tyler Technologies Odyssey?
Odyssey is a massive software suite used by courts across the country to manage their digital dockets, file documents, and schedule hearings. If a rogue actor has access to that infrastructure, they can manipulate the timeline of legal proceedings, backdate orders, or execute service evasion.
Service evasion.
Meaning they legally claim they served you with papers when they actually didn't, causing you to miss hearings and receive default judgments against you.
But what was the goal? Why alter a local court docket in a domestic relations track? Why would a local court have any jurisdiction over a federal defense IP case?
That is the insidious nature of the alleged maneuver. Federal courts are highly scrutinized, and patent litigation takes years. But a local domestic relations court handles property disputes, divorces, and local civil matters. The threshold for action is much lower. According to the document, the ultimate goal of manipulating this local docket was the issuance of pocket warrants aimed at executing a forced physical conversion of his corporate computing hardware.
You're talking about data spoliation.
Precisely. Data spoliation is the destruction or alteration of evidence. By using a local civil dispute as a pretext, they could get a local judge to sign a generic property seizure order. Then, local law enforcement, who know nothing about optical computing or naval reactors, are sent to raid his property in Katy, Texas, and physically seize his laptops and hard drives under the guise of a civil dispute.
The goal isn't to win a lawsuit. The goal is to physically confiscate the source code infrastructure of the patents before federal IP lawyers even know what is happening. They are weaponizing local civil asset forfeiture as a backdoor to bypass federal intellectual property protection.
Exactly. Aguiar is warning the Department of Defense and Congress that these local extrajurisdictional actions are actually an asymmetric retaliatory mechanism deployed to disrupt his federal reporting line.
He is literally begging the Pentagon to intervene. He's saying, hey, you guys own a perpetual license to this world-changing military technology, and right now a local court in Texas is trying to confiscate the physical assets that contain the keys to your new weapons systems. I have to step back and look at the sheer mismatch of scale here. It is mind-blowing. You have a single residential address in Katy, Texas, going up against the combined legal might of Washington, D.C., Lockheed Martin, and Silicon Valley. Can one guy actually survive this kind of systemic pressure?
It highlights the extreme operational friction that occurs when a single individual attempts to audit a closed-loop system of this magnitude. It is a testament to the power of administrative law that he is even able to force them into this standoff.
All right, let's wrap our arms around the massive scope of what we have covered today in this deep dive. We started with the concept of a mechanic double charging for parts you already own. We looked at Aguiar's 52 patents and his irrevocable royalty-free license to the military. We broke down the mechanics of the Atomic Express, a nuclear-powered, self-balancing centipede train that uses piezoelectric crystals and kinetic arbitrage to revolutionize logistics.
We examined the Marcelo Loop, decoupling supply chains, solving the lithium bottleneck, and creating ghost convoys that can shatter and autonomously reform around blast craters using fail-safe battery buffers.
We dove deep into the death of legacy silicon and the rise of optical, post-binary, high-radix computing. We explored how big tech might be selling invisible light communication tech to the military at a premium, hiding it in VR headsets and airdrop. We looked at the F-35 melting without this technology, the massive threat of asymmetric optical decryption breaking our national security, and finally, a high-stakes legal standoff playing out in a Texas county court through manipulated dockets.
The breadth of the technological architecture is staggering. But the administrative mechanism, the DFARS claims, the RPost cryptographically verified emails, and the establishment of actual knowledge is the legal engine driving this entire conflict.
And the most important takeaway for you, the listener, is that this is happening right now, in real time, with your tax dollars. If RJ Agwar is right, the United States government already holds the legal blueprint to leapfrog our adversaries, secure our supply chains, and build the next generation of computing entirely for free. But the sheer inertia of bureaucracy, combined with the financial greed of massive defense contractors protecting their profit margins, is getting in the way.
This raises an important question, and it is the thought I want to leave you with. We have spent this entire deep dive focusing on the financial and legal ramifications of what happens if the U.S. military ignores this free license and simply keeps paying the contractors to build it anyway. But what happens if the U.S. government decides this is all just a bureaucratic nuisance? What if they ignore the technology entirely, leaving the blueprints for the Atomic Express and optical decryption out in the open? What happens when a rival superpower realizes the keys to the kingdom are sitting in the public patent registry waiting to be perfected, while we are still arguing over copper wires and diesel trucks?
Who truly controls the architecture of our future? The mechanic who sends the fraudulent bill or the inventor who holds the patent? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope we have given you a massive amount of information to process and explore on your own. Stay insanely curious, keep looking under the hood of your own car, and we will catch you next time.